Welcome to the Cam Valley Forum, Bathavon Forum. I know it's known by both names by people. We've got a very tight agenda, so the approach going to take is to keep things quite tightly time controlled. And if there are questions which have not been able to be answered within the time frame, then if you could put your points, questions, queries, whatever they may be, at that point in the chat, then they will be picked up and dealt with following the meeting. It's really the only way of keeping focus on the time, or we could be here for quite a time, I feel, on a couple of the subjects. So welcome. Dave, do we have any apologies? Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, I can answer because Mark's been very efficient. We've got apologies from Leader of the Council, Kevin Guy, Robert Law, Denise Perrin, one of the village agents, and Anna Berrier, and I think Matt McCabe, Mark, didn't apologise about half an hour ago.
That's correct, yeah.
Can I offer apologies from Catherine Manchi as well, who's sadly just gone down with COVID?
Oh dear. Okay, yeah, I'll record that.
Thanks.
How frustrating.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. The main first item on the agenda, our local plan, health and wellbeing strategy, improving our area to make it easier for people to live healthier lives, following on from that statement on COVID. If I can hand over to Nancy Towers, and I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong, but Fidelia?
It's just me. Fidelia's not.
Just you. Well, that makes pronunciation easier.
And
welcome,
it's also
Nancy.
Thank you. And we're doing a kind of a joint presentation with the local plan as well. Simon, I don't know if do you want to do the introduction? And
thank you, Nancy. John, we'll be as quickly as we can because I appreciate you're under time, so we'll just race through the slides quite quickly and leave some chance for conversation. We've got a very short presentation. If you could nip to the next slide, and what we've got, we're on the cusp of two linked projects and plans which we're currently preparing. The health and wellbeing strategy, which Nancy will talk about, and we're just launching the new local plan. And they share common outcomes in terms of the effects on people and a lot of objectives. So at the beginning of the process, we do all the forums, and we want your views on those plans. So Nancy, you're kicking off with the first bit, just talking about the health wellbeing strategy.
Thanks, Simon. Mark, if you could, the next slide. So just introducing the health and wellbeing strategy that Fidelia and I are supporting the council and other partners to develop. So almost every aspect of our lives impacts on our health and how long we live. So this includes our jobs, our homes, and access to education and public transport. And we know in our area that lives are being cut short, and so people who live in certain areas are dying earlier than they should. And next slide, thanks, Mark. Thanks. So we also know that we need to get the right building blocks in place so everyone in our community can thrive. So we need to have the right transport so people can access services. We need jobs that pay a reasonable wage so people can afford to live well and healthily. We need people to be able to access food, have support from friends and family in their community, and also know that the surroundings and environment affect how people's health and well-being's outcomes as well. If you can move on to the next slide, thanks, Mark. So one example of how these kind of wider determinants of health affect our health and well-being is that we know in Bath and North East Somerset that there's a relatively high cost of housing compared to low wages. So it's tricky for many people to be able to afford decent homes that provide the warmth and good conditions for people to live in. So if people are living in crowded conditions or houses that are poorly ventilated, which leads to mold, can lead to respiratory conditions. But also, I suppose, the stress of living in those kind of conditions can impact people's mental health and lower their immune system as well. So they're more frequently ill more often. So yeah, poor housing can have quite a big impact on health and well-being. The next slide, thanks, Mark. So just to let you know kind of why the health and wellbeing strategy is important. So it will set the vision for what we want to achieve with health and wellbeing in Bath and North East Somerset. It's going to identify the key priorities for improving health and wellbeing in our area. It's going to drive and influence the delivery of health and social care for the next 5 to 10 years. It'll provide an integrated framework that aligns with other local strategies and also NHS system strategies as well. It seeks to target priorities that will reduce health inequalities and support all to live healthy and well lives. And it engages with local partners and communities to ensure local needs are being met. Thanks, Mark. Next slide. So this is just a kind of snapshot of how we're approaching the development of the strategy. So we're kind of on the left-hand side of this diagram at the moment, seeking views of residents and collecting data and input from organisations working in Baines, which will feed into the priorities for the plan. And we hope to have a strategy, a draft strategy produced for January. Next slide, Mark. But I suppose, yes, to get our priorities right, we really need to hear from you about what's important to your health and well-being. And next slide, Mark. We do have, we've recently launched a short survey, which would be brilliant if you could all complete. It shouldn't take any longer than 5 minutes. And it would be great if you could encourage your networks to also complete it. I'll put a link to it in the chat as well, so you can access it easily. And I'll hand over to Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. If you carry on, Mark, so you'll see from Nancy's presentation that lots of those issues are interrelated between health planning and also the economic strategy. So in terms of, we're on the cusp of reviewing some quite fundamental plans which affect everybody's lives across the district in all sorts of areas. So hence the need for us to work jointly, and it's very timely to have the new local plan launch, which took place this week. So if you see the publicity, the launch document was published yesterday, I think it was. The local plan is quite a long-term plan, and it's a very key document, as you all know, because it will set out the council's planning policies for a lengthy period of time. 20 years, although it's very hard to look forward that far, but we do need to have a long-term approach to planning. And in particular, because the WECA spatial development strategy is no longer progressing, the West of England unity authorities have to pick up that strategic planning framework in their local plans. That gives added impetus to the local plan to get it right and to make sure it delivers what we want across the communities, as well as some of the council's key ambitions. If you can, next slide, please, Mark. From a Baines point of view, the members have given us 4 clear priorities that a local plan should seek to deliver. And there aren't any surprises to you. I think they align quite well with some of yours, having looked at your ongoing issues log. So responding to the climate change challenge, the delivery of affordable housing, transforming our approach to protecting nature and enhancing nature, and then the provision of jobs, the right kind of jobs that our communities need, and also the right kind of jobs which reflect our new economic approach and the climate emergency. Those are the 4 big drivers. Next slide, please, Mark. Obviously, we can't ignore the local plan. It is comprehensive. It does need to cover a range of issues. So it will cover things like addressing the 5-year housing plan from government and the range of housing needs. It'll look at the range of other issues which you'd expect from a local plan to look at, and I won't run through all of those. I think many of you are familiar with what the local plan does. But the local plan provides the basis for decisions on planning applications and investment decisions, and also appeals. So we need to make sure we've got the right framework in place. So whilst we've got 4 big priorities, and those will be reviewed as we go through the process and we're talking to communities, we need to make sure that the broad range of issues addressed by the local plan. Next slide, please, Mark. One of the key. Sorry. Okay, shall I carry on? I heard some talking in the background. One of the.
Please do.
Sorry, John.
Sorry, please do carry on.
Okay, all right. I think one of the key messages today is to let you know that with the launch of the local plan this week, we are having engagement activities with local communities. A first day towards the end of this year, beginning of next year. And this is to really to speak to communities and to come and listen to what are your concerns, what are the key issues affecting you, what are the priorities that we should be including in the plan, to be driving the plan alongside those 4 big priorities from Baines. And so we'll be writing to you all very soon. And I think our particular question, what we're going to ask you in the letter to come to you this week, will be how do you want to engage in the local plan process? So you could set up a parish working group. In the past, you've had neighbourhood planning groups, which have worked very well. You could have a joint working group across parishes. Really, we want to leave it to you to decide how we work with you. It's the most effective way in light of your scarce resources and our scarce resources. How can we best work with you? And there's also a conversation around the role you want to play. So in the previous local plan, some of the parish councils undertook some quite significant work in terms of local assessments on character appraisals. We did some training to assist in that. And again, you can take a similar view, and even some background noise there. I wonder if somebody needs to go on mute. There was also some of the parish councils even chose to identify which housing sites, where there was a need for a housing site, which sites and how that was delivered. And then also we want to clarify whether existing neighbourhood plans, adopted plans, we need to clarify how those would fit in with the local plan, tasks which fall to the local plan, the tasks which fall to neighbourhood plans, and how those relate. So that's part of the conversation we're going to launch with you at the initial stage of consultation towards the end of this year. I think, Mark, is that the last slide coming up? Just a reminder of where you are in terms of the existing local plan policy framework. It's a fairly constrained area in terms of green belt and A and B. In the past, we've had pressures from Bath, and I know some of you are aware those are still affecting parts of the Bathavon area. So there's a number of issues which, if we can throw open a discussion that both Nancy has covered on the health and wellbeing strategy, and I've picked up and echoed in the local plan. So I've listed those there. This is really the start of us listening to you. We won't go through all of those, but some in terms of us trying to understand what are the key priorities. We've picked up those because you've kept the log, which is very helpful. But things like the ongoing impact of Bath and the role of greenbelt villages, the lack of employment opportunities, housing need, the right kind of housing, the right scale, in the right places for the right to support the economy. Big issues that come through from you before, excuse me, are biodiversity and seeking to protect things like ancient woodlands, green corridors, tree planting. Some of those fall in the local plan, some of those don't fall in the local plan. But the conversation will also feed into the council's economic strategy. So really, it's a very broad conversation with you feeding into the health and wellbeing strategy, the economic strategy, and the local plan. I won't go through that because I think I'd rather we had opened the conversation, John, over to you, and we could listen to what you've got to say. Obviously, it's very early on. It's not a comprehensive range of issues I've given you, but if we just start the conversation at least. I don't know how much time we've got, John, people to respond to that, both Nancy and my presentations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simone. I'm busily trying to get to. Yeah, we've got 15-ish minutes left for discussion, so that's certainly enough time to get things moving. Thank you both. Are there any immediate questions that people have? I'll throw questions out to the floor.
I got a question. Hold on. I just wanted to clarify. You said that a letter's going to come out to.
Sorry, you've gone quiet.
John, he's mute. I think Paul's muted himself. I think, hasn't he?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So I'm from Coombe Hay Parish Council. I just wanted to clarify that you are going to engage the parish councils and ask us a bit more directly about what matters to us. Is that correct? Is that coming through as a letter or something?
That's exactly the purpose of the engagement towards the end of the year. We want to really be in listening mode.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we've spoken to all the parishes in a way you want, how you want to engage, either directly with yourselves, or if you want to have a subgroup, whatever we want. And that's the purpose of the legislature, to clarify how you want us to work with you, and then make those arrangements
Yeah.
for the workshops, the community engagement workshops at the end of the year.
Right. Okay. And will that come through to our parish council clerk or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. My screen's just gone. Everyone's moved around. Hand up from Fiona.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the WECA plan. You say it's a pause. Is there any chance that it's going to be reimposed during the period of the development of the plan, and what impact that would have on your plan?
Theoretically, the WECA mayor could decide to resume work on the SDS. It's very clearly halted it. It's not his priority. So in a sense, so for that reason, you just have to pick up the planning framework. It's very unlikely, in light of his workload and his ambitions and priorities, very unlikely that that plan would resume. But it is a risk. It is written back. I think it's a very low risk.
Thank you. And any other questions?
John, there's two points in the chat. There's one from Jan, helps. He just asks, what is a 15-minute neighbourhood?
I missed that. Thank you. Simone?
I'm happy to have a first stab. Colleagues may want to come in, but really what it is an approach which is gaining momentum and understanding. Is trying to ensure that for sustainability reasons and good community reasons, people can generally operate their lives in a fairly small area for their basic goods. So they can go take their children to school locally, they can shop locally, they can go to recreation locally, in terms of enabling them to walk and cycle and use sustainable modes of transport. So it is an ambition. In some cases, it'll be very difficult, and I can imagine in the rural areas in particular, it's a challenge. In urban areas, it probably might be easier. But obviously, we understand the nature of the rural spirit of our villages. That's something we'll need to consider. How far, if we think it's a very helpful priority, you may have a similar view or not. And if it is, how far can we reconfigure things in terms of the transport work we're doing, in terms of the planning work we're doing, and other work, related work, in terms of helping people have that community focus. Sometimes I've heard of a 20-minute neighbourhood, but really the principle is that people live their lives in a fairly local way.
I understand. Any other questions?
I think Louise has got her hand up, John. Louise Morris.
Louise. Sorry, you're on mute, Louise.
Apologies. Yeah, sorry, Louise Morris, Head of Green Transformation at Bath Council. So with regard to 15-minute neighbourhoods, I think there's something on the agenda, isn't there, later, which is talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods. But I think the key point there is it's actually an international movement, and it's trying to build consensus within self-selected communities about how transport and other issues to do with sustainability can be addressed by community. So it is something which people are trying to do from the bottom up. But I do think there's somebody on the agenda later to provide more detail on that.
There is. We've got livable neighbourhoods following.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. A question. I've got two questions on what was put. On the local plan at the presentation at the start, statement was made of looking for the right transport. How are we going to understand what is the right transport? Because the problem we've got in rural areas is very different to urban areas, in that walking and cycling is only part of the answer. It certainly doesn't cover the whole community. And this is very much linked with the transport issue later. Sarah.
Hello, I was going to say that some of it is about minimising the need for moving around. So some of that's about this 15-minute neighbourhood or 20-minute neighbourhood. So the more services you can have locally in your community or visiting your community, the less you're going to have to travel. So that's one of the factors. And then totally accept that some rural journeys are not possible on foot or by bike, although we obviously want to make those that are possible more feasible by making sure there are pavements and safe places to cycle in the right places. But then when the distances are just too great, it might be about demand responsive transport, which is a new idea that potentially can make where rural buses have become unviable to run, it's something where you phone or you go online and you can order a minibus to come and take you where you want to go, or there could be car clubs, or it could just be about electric vehicle charging, or facilitating communities to find ways to sort of share lifts. So I mean, yeah, there's some ideas.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I suppose what my question was aimed at was, how is this information of the need of what is needed where going to be identified? Is this going to be part of the local plan interaction over the rest of the year, or is there another activity that's going to take place? So
I have an initial response to that, John, and that this conversation is really feeding to a number of different strategies, and as I said before, so there's obviously the economic strategy the council's going to work on. We've had Nancy spoke about the health and wellbeing strategy. There's the local plan. Obviously, transport is integral to a sound local plan and a sustainable approach. So we're working very closely in the local plan side with transport colleagues. It's a sort of a joined approach. But there's other initiatives the council's undertaking, which I think they're on your agenda later, in terms of the range of different interventions and opportunities and where things perhaps need to go in the future to enable us to deliver the sustainability we want. So this conversation is we're going to feed into a number of different plans.
That makes sense, and perhaps better discussed under the transport section, without a doubt. The second question I've got, which may be more of a point, but there was stress made on a local renewable energy plan. I don't know if other parishes are engaged in setting up local renewable energy facilities, but we are in Freshford and we've hit a full stop in that the grid is unable to take the capacity needed to be delivered. And therefore, I suppose my question is delivery capacity part of the overall consideration within the plan? Or are we stuck with what is and work within the current infrastructure? I'm not sure who that question would be aimed at.
So I'm happy to come in there. So in the context of networks, connections, distribution, there is an understanding that there are challenges in our area in the southwest at the moment, and there are lots of conversations which are trying to unblock this. But I don't see this as being a barrier to ambition on renewables. It's a challenge that we have to face about connections and the network, but we're not seeing it as a barrier to progressing renewables. Yeah, okay.
Surely, if we want to get a group of people together to talk about, local renewable energy, but currently there is a barrier to connecting to the network, then it is a barrier, isn't it? Obviously, the ambition is to unlock all of these barriers, but if we want to get people to start thinking about renewable energy, but actually we can't connect to it, there's no point doing that until we know that we've got an avenue to connect into it. Surely we discussed it at our meeting last night. people are interested, but if we haven't got a way of doing it physically, then there's going to be less buy-in into actually starting something in the first place. So how is that being unblocked?
So I suppose it's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? So it's recognised, it's been recognised for many, many years that this is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people at the highest level that are working to resolve this problem. And in many ways, the more we focus on renewable energy, arguably, you know, that will help unblock the challenge or unblock the problem. But so I suppose we all need to work together on this. And I suppose I'm just trying to provide some reassurance that at local, regional and national level, it's recognised and people are trying to unblock it. Yeah.
All right. Good. Good.
Would it help if we asked all the parishes within the Bathavon Cam Valley area about their thoughts on this, so we actually could get an overall forum view? Would that be of help?
Yeah, right. Is that something that could be a specific thing that is part of the local plan? That there was a question that was asked by Baines that says, are you interested in doing renewable energy projects in your local area? If the answer is yes, the next question might be, well, how far down the line are you? You know, because and then it gets asked as part of that local plan, rather than waiting for us, each individual council, to raise it.
Paul, that was exactly the point I was raising. If we pull together everybody's views, then at least we have a statement of intent, and someone from Baines would be able to help with the likely volume of power. I can't remember the right word. But the exact number of kilowatts for each community, then that builds the picture on what is needed on the grid.
Okay.
Sarah.
I was just going to come in because Louise, of course, as the council officer, can't express a political opinion. So I just thought I'd come in and point out that what she's really saying, I think, is that we need to lobby upwards a lot because the blockage is with national government.
I'd taken that message. Any other questions? No?
John, Fiona Gawley from Southstoke, she's got a hand up.
Oh, Fiona, sorry.
Sorry, I've got a second.
In the position where a hand had been up, so apologies.
Yeah, no, I apologise. I'm asking a second question. So, in terms of housing numbers, I understood that part of the concern with the WECA plan and some of the previous iterations of regional-wide plans is that Bath and North East Somerset sometimes suffers because whilst we have managed to build our quota of houses, Bristol might not have done. And then we get imposed with houses that we don't necessarily want in areas that we don't necessarily want because we're taking over spill from Bristol. I mean, that's possibly simplifying the issue, but is that I suppose my concern with if the WECA plan comes back, is that going to be a case again that we're going to have to face dealing with Bristol overspill? I wonder if anyone can help me with that.
Yeah, I can pick that one up. In terms of housing numbers, the government really starts the ball rolling by giving all the authorities a housing quantum to seek to find, and then it's for us local authorities to seek to pursue those through local plans and make sure we can deliver those sustainably. In some cases, authorities provide a case by saying why they think you couldn't deliver that quantum sustainably. What doesn't go away, even without a WECA plan, is the duty to cooperate, and that's always there in government legislation. So we're required to consider how far we can help and assist adjoining authorities in meeting unmet need that they just can't accommodate. So WECA plan or no WECA plan, that obligation still applies to our plan, but we can only allocate sites for housing if they are sustainable and deliverable, and we can't accommodate additional housing of our own, even if we're struggling to meet our own. So that'll have to be worked through the local plan process in terms of starting with a housing figure, looking at the opportunities, looking at what can sustainably be delivered, ending up with a policy-driven figure which is right for Baines. And through that process, we'll have to, we know that Bristol can't meet its housing needs. Bristol will ask us to assist. We will have to respond in terms of evidence we've got, what can be delivered. Obviously, Bristol will be looking to locations on the edge of the city, of the urban area. It'll be the primary, it doesn't make sense looking for far-flung locations. But that will be part of the process we do go through.
Thank you very much, Simone. That's helpful. Simone asked a very, very important question, which is, how would we like to engage with Baines? That's for us to decide.
John, I'm not asking for an answer to that question tonight. I'm just...
No, I know. I wasn't going to answer it. What I was going to suggest is we've got a very similar question coming up on transport and possibly livable neighbourhoods. What I was going to suggest is if we as a forum pull those subjects together into one discussion at the end, and then we can get straight what we need to do to take this forwards, because Simone's absolutely right. We can't just answer that question this minute, but we need work out what we need to be able to give that response and put something in place. Is that generally acceptable? I'll put it another way. Does anyone object to that? No, I gave you 2 seconds. So thank you very much for the local plan, health and well-being. I'll draw the curtain down on that part of the agenda. If anyone does have any further questions that come to mind, please do put those questions into the chat and they will be picked up. Okay. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is developing livable neighbourhoods, what it means for our area. Mark, I can't see Ashley in the...
Yeah, he's arrived. Yeah, Ashley is here. Yeah.
Hi, John.
Excellent. Hi, Ashley.
Hi. Hi. Thanks, Mark, for the slides. Do you want me to just crack on, John?
Please do. I'll just warn you, we've got 15 minutes and we'll cut off at that point, and anything outstanding will be logged and taken forwards.
Okay, I'll try and match the tempo of Simone's presentation, but I think I might struggle, to be honest. You did a very good job of rattling through. So I'm Ashley Bateman, I'm a project manager for Livable Neighbourhoods. I'm here with Joe Salmons, who's assistant transport planner. Joe's been with the programme from the start. Claire, I've brought across with me from our CAS project, from the Clean Air Zone project. She's our behavioural change team leader, who's also on the call. Next slide, please. Thanks, Mark. We're just going to talk about, it's basically an update on livable neighbourhoods and just kind of where we are, just to let you know about it as a forum. So what are livable neighbourhoods? We'll talk about why do we need them, where we are in terms of that first phase, what we've achieved so far, what we're doing now, and then what will happen next. And then if there is time, a bit of Q&A at the end, if that's all right. As we go through these slides, there are quite a few images that are quite urban, and that's just a function of where livable neighbourhoods have been done so far. We are, however, in Bath breaking the mould as always, and we are doing schemes or looking at schemes in Bath Eastern, Whitchurch Village, Queen Charlton and Temple Cloud. So as I say, there is some, it is quite urban as it's positioned on these slides, but please take away that livable neighbourhoods are, as we were talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods or 20-minute neighbourhoods earlier, they are able to be done everywhere. It's just a case of application. So please just say, just don't take that imagery as being the only way, the only place that these livable neighbourhoods can be done. So what's it about? Slightly different to 15-minute neighbourhoods, I'll be honest with you. We're more about, it's not dissimilar, but we're more about that reallocation and rebalancing of road space to allow that fairer access and amenity for all users, not just motorists. It's about creating more space for active travel. It's about creating healthier, pleasanter places for people to sit and to dwell. So as I say in the bottom right-hand corner there, it's not just around a series of traffic interventions. We're looking at this at Livable Neighbourhoods in a much more holistic way. And it's really about improving health and well-being more than anything else. Next slide, please, Mark, thanks. What enables it in terms of features? We're looking at infrastructure improvements like wider pavements, drop curbs, dedicated lanes for cycling. Occasionally, some communities are quite keen on modal filters and vehicle restrictions, and there are various ways of doing that. But also, as I say, we're talking about better social spaces and potentially even straying to things like residence parking schemes as part of a livable neighbourhood. Thanks. Next slide, please, Mark. One of the things that we're quite big on here with livable neighbourhoods is, and I think someone was talking about it earlier when they were talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods, it is very much what the community wants. It's very much a community-led programme, and it's been very successful to take that approach, to really work closely with communities, and to bring forward their ideas into the process and use what they want to achieve as the basis for the programme. Looking at the other way, we're very keen also to meet the council's overriding objectives to deliver against a climate and ecological emergency, and also giving people a greater say. But as I say, I think in the way that we're doing it with what we call co-design or co-development of the various schemes, we are really ticking that giving people a greater say box, I think quite nicely. And I think the challenge for us as a team now is to make sure that we deliver now against those climate and ecological emergency objectives, things like encouraging situations that enable us to reduce car trips, putting in infrastructure that takes opportunities to increase biodiversity, those sorts of things. Final point on that slide, these aren't new. As I say, they have been done elsewhere. We're now adapting and developing what people have done elsewhere and making it work for us in Bath. Next slide, please. Why do we need them? As I touched on, I think on the first slide, we've got just a sheer number of vehicles on the road. Predominantly, I have to say, they are cars, unfortunately. It's effectively discouraging people from doing these journeys by other ways. And I've got a slide in a minute which sort of builds on that. We do have to meet these climate and ecological emergency targets that we've got. Again, getting people to think about different ways of doing things is important. Important in terms of delivering against those objectives, and everyone, we take a view that everyone does have a part to play. Again, I'll come to this in a second in a bit more detail, but everyone has a part to play in delivering against these objectives, reducing vehicle emissions, improving air quality, and improving not only their health but also the health of others in terms of the impact of their actions on others as well. Again, I'll come to that in a bit more detail in a second. It's also about rebalancing in terms of status quo. I know when we did Clean Air Zone project, for example, a lot of the roads that were heavily affected by pollution are often the people who are the most vulnerable that live on them. And so that is also an important part of this programme, that kind of rebalancing as well. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. We're not anti-car. That's not what this is about. It is just, as I keep saying, getting that balance right. So there is always a place on our streets for cars, but it's a question of whether they should dominate. And unfortunately, we're talking about now a lot of what we're talking about is a transition to electric cars, potentially in the future or autonomous cars. They're still cars, and we're still taking up the same amount of road space. So we do unfortunately have to find ways to do things differently, and that's what this programme is about. Next slide, please, Mark. This is one of the slide that I alluded to earlier, where you've got this traffic-inducing traffic graphic on the left-hand side. This is a scenario that we have all faced at some point in time. There is too much traffic, so we drive the child to school. I think that's a great sort of truism. Going back to what we're saying on the right-hand side, it is we are doing as part of the programme a number of capital interventions. But there's also this point about choice, which is why Claire and her team are really important. in this programme. It is about encouraging people and supporting them to do things differently, travel less, consume less, care more about others in our communities. So, for example, if I do decide to drive, just reflect on the impact my driving has had, my choice of route, for example, on other communities. So potentially encouraging people to stick to the main routes rather than take shortcuts through deeply residential neighbourhoods. Also, my driver behaviour. Am I being a good driver in the sense that I'm not discouraging people from walking and cycling? There's a lot to do in that sort of behaviour change space. We're also not asking everyone to go all out, get rid of the car, do something else. Again, cars always have their space and their place in what we need to do. But there are, probably for nearly everybody, one or two or several journeys that are currently taken that could be done a different way. And those in aggregate have a significant impact on the road network. And so it might not feel like much, but if people can be encouraged, and Claire's team is doing a lot of work on this, if people can be encouraged to just do something differently, one or 2 days a week, that can all in aggregate make a significant difference. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. In terms of where we're doing them, I won't go through the full list. A lot are in Bath at this moment in time, but as I said earlier, we do have schemes going on, livable neighbourhoods being brought forward outside of Bath. So I'm looking at Bath Eastern, Whitchurch Village, Queen Charlton, Temple Cloud. So it is important to recognise that this not only applies in an urban setting, but also in a rural or semi-rural setting as well. Thanks, Mark. Next slide. In terms of what we've achieved so far, we went out with the overarching strategy to consultation in autumn 2020. Summer 21, we had 48 communities come forward with applications and requests for livable neighbourhoods, 15 of those prioritised, and we're taking those forward now in this first phase. Back end of last year, we held a public engagement to sort of tease out people's broad themes and what they would like to see in their areas, what they thought was good about their areas, and then the issues that they experienced. Next slide, please, Mark. I've now come in and built on that. Over the summer, we've had residents attending workshops. That's been brilliant, I have to say. Nearly everyone has ended up with people clapping and really supporting the exercise that we've had. They've shared their ideas and issues that they've identified on maps, along with potential solutions. We've then gone back and had exhibitions to feed that back, just validate that we've got the right end of the stick in terms of what we've heard people say in the workshops. And we've also asked them to now prioritise what we take forward to preliminary design. And we're currently going through a sort of prioritisation exercise as a project team to get to a point where we can make a recommendation to Sarah and ward members about what we take forward to preliminary design. We've not only held that mainstream kind of workshop approach, we've also gone out and visited local groups who might find it harder to come to the workshop. So a good example in the local areas, Bath Eastern Youth Club. And we fed that voice, as it were, into the process as well. Next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So in terms of next steps, as I touched on just now, we'll be prioritising what came out in the exhibitions. We're judging those against a range of factors to come to a short list of interventions that take them forward to preliminary design. That's the next thing in front of us. We're then going to go out to a really wide engagement because I'm very mindful that there are communities where things are being improved, and there might be communities where people have got concerns about potential displacement of traffic and all sorts of other things. There may be also communities that are really interested in this process and would like to find out more. And so I think we're quite keen on a big, wide engagement at this next stage. We'll then go through to detailed design, formal consultation on where it's needed at that stage, and then we're into actually the implementation. I think you can see we've built a process that's about building consensus. It's about engaging with people. It's about co-design, as I said earlier, and it's really allowing people plenty of opportunities to have their say and build that consensus that really then delivers a really good, solid scheme. I think that's me done. Hopefully we're in time. Any questions? I think you're on mute, John.
Beginner's error. Apologies. Fiona.
Always have a question. I suppose the question I have is about what about the areas where I mean, obviously a number of the areas are in Bath and there's a lot of Lib Dem councillors there. What about the areas which don't have Lib Dem councillors who don't share the same views? How are they going to be represented? I'm thinking the sort of the areas towards Bristol and in the Chew Valley and places like that. Are they also involved in this process?
Any community is able to put forward an application. I can't comment on the 15 areas that were chosen. I wasn't project managing the program at that time. Sarah, I don't know if you're able to comment at all.
Yeah, I mean, any ward councillor was able to put forward a proposal, a bid. The only non-Lib Dem at the time who did so was Paul May, who has last week actually switched anyway and joined the Lib Dems. But when he applied a couple of years ago, he was a Conservative. He was the only non-Lib Dem who chose to apply for a neighbourhood, livable neighbourhood that I'm aware of. Certainly in the assessment process, unless any have put any. In the ones of the 48 that we shortlisted from to the 15, that was the only non-Lib Dem I was aware of. So I mean, I guess that if someone was in a community that had a non-Lib Dem ward councillor, but the parish council very actively wanted a livable neighbourhood, you should probably make contact with me or with the project team, and we'll see what we can do and see if we can bring the ward councillor on board, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, Sarah. Do we any other questions? No, I think the presentation was actually all inclusive. It certainly answered the questions that I had.
Okay, good.
So thank you very much, Ashley. Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thanks everyone for the time to do it. I'll put a contact in the chat in case anyone's got any questions to sort of follow up afterwards. Thanks very much.
Fantastic, Ashley. Thank you. Pardon me. I think we're actually still on schedule just about. Well, I never. Community resilience. That Daniel Node and or Lucy Bible. Bill? Sorry, I'm very bad at pronouncing this one.
Yeah, hi John. Yeah. Hi John, it's Daniel here. It's Lucy Bible.
Sorry, Lucy.
Excellent. I think Mark's going to share our presentation, so I'll wait for Mark to bring up the presentation and then I'll start, John.
Yeah, just bringing it up now.
Please do.
Thanks, Mark. Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. So just a quick introduction. So my name is Daniel Node, who, for people that haven't seen or heard me before, so I'm the emergency planning team manager and I'm responsible for writing plans for the local authority in response to a major incident, or to work with our partners in regards to responding and recovering from an incident. Pardon me. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build on our incident planning and build on community resilience in an incident. So when there's an emergency, stronger communities mean that we can respond better because we're more effective, and we can recover from an incident as well by building those stronger communities. So if you go on to the next slide, Mark. So this is what we're trying to do. We want to empower individuals, households, businesses and community groups and public organisations to take responsibility for their own resilience, so that when the worst happens, all sections of the community have protected themselves and are enabled to support each other in a pre-planned way until life returns to normality. So it's really important that we're able to respond as communities, and we're able to support the emergency services that work on the ground, and the local authority as well, that provide that wraparound support in regards to welfare, psychosocial support, rest centres, which we did 2 weeks ago with the fire that we encountered in Bath. And also in the recovery phase as well, that we know from studies from Grenfell, from other incidences that have happened, that community groups are incredibly important in actually providing, you know, a lead in what's actually going to happen in those communities as we go forward post-incident. So that's really important, but it's building on those resilience, and that's what we're trying to do with the work that we're doing with community resilience. Next slide, please, Mark. So the slide here is a kind of, you know, it's got the sort of monument here with a hat on the top, which is resilience communities, and then you've got the pillars that are holding up the hat for the roof there. So what we're trying to do is the first pillar there on the left-hand side, which has got RA, risk aware, is be aware of your risks in your community. Sign up to weather warnings that the EA provide. Keep community channels open, news reports, etc. And the second pillar there, which is the green one from left to right, is about individual and family resilience as well. Have grab bags available, personal and household emergency plans. So know where your evacuation points are. So, you know, if you're in a vulnerable area, where, say, vulnerable area for flooding, where your high points are, so you can actually make sure that your family and people within your house unit are able to be able to sort of, you know, find places of safety, and that's really important as well. The middle column there is about resilient carers and vulnerable. Know your neighbours, check on them, ensure carers can still visit if there is an incident, and also what they're, you know, ensuring that there's medication availability as well. That's all important as well. And we found that with our recent rest centre when we were able to support with those people that have been displaced and didn't have the medication that they needed. Business communities, awareness of resources, volunteers, making sure areas are not neglected. That's all important, so that the emergency services and us as Cat 1 responders and Category 1 responders are people that respond to an incident once it's declared a major incident, and the local authority is one of those responders as well. The last column there is the what resources are out there. So we are part of the Avon and Somerset Local Resilience Forum. As I said, the emergency services are part of those forums, as well as the local authorities, the Environment Agency, the Met Office, and we prepare plans, framework plans, strategic plans, tactical plans, to ensure that we can all support each other in the event of an incident. And that's really important as well. And the hat there, that's the resilience communities, is having community champions, the eyes and ears on the ground, feeding vital information to the council and receiving that information as well, and help coordinate any response on the ground. We recently, when in February when Storm Eunice struck, we really worked well with the community champions that have been identified with the Connecting Communities team, and they were able to provide us vital information on the ground when the Western Power distribution website was telling us a different story. We were able to get that vital information on the ground to make sure that we released resources in the right areas. Otherwise, we could have been releasing resources into areas where we didn't need to put those resources. So it's really key to supporting those communities and providing that resilience. Next slide, please, Mark. So it's really important to be informed, know the hazards for your areas. So, you know, we know, you know, when there's fuel issues, you know how you can support your community members by, you know, you have the means to go and go further afield to find some, you know, fuel which may be able to support. Understand how people, you know, where there might be people that can support you as well, and also come into the local authority, because we may have resources that we're able to support as well. But these are some of the hazards that might be presented to your communities. We know, you know, every time there's a snow event, that there's a lot of concern about how people might be, vulnerable people might be visited, and how we might actually just keep the country going when there's snow. But I think for us, it's really understanding if we can get those links on the ground, then we can obviously try and support those people that might be cut off. We have close links with voluntary agencies such as Wessex 4x4 that can help provide transport into those areas through their 4x4 vehicles to support those people that are vulnerable. Power outages as well. We're working on plans at the moment to ensure that we communicate within emergency services. And we have BC plans in place to make sure that we can effectively respond, but also in the event in your communities is ensuring that if there is a power outage, that again, we are able to support those communities as well. And we know as well as flooding, we support Magna, have a fast rising river there, that we are able to support those communities by actually doing a lot of pre-work, clearing gullies, making sure that the river there is clear to make sure that it free flows. So there's a lot of planning that goes in before there's an incident, but then when their incident happens, that we've got those links, we know where the rendezvous points are, and we can support those people in the communities. Next slide, Mark. This is all about being prepared, risk aware. By being prepared and being risk aware, it means it builds on that resilience. Have an action plan and don't expose your family, yourself and your family to undue risk. And what we're trying to do is prevent. This is the work we're trying to do at the moment. Prevent by writing plans, by getting those community, by linking into those community agents and champions within the areas to ensure that we can start to understand the hazards, which was the slide before, and how we might be able to prevent some of those hazards becoming major incidences and being able to put that support where we need it. Protecting as well. So what can we do if we know there are hazards particular to those communities? We might need to put some extra protection in place. We did that with Chew Valley with the flood boards and supporting with with their emergency evacuation plan. But there might be other hazards where we're not aware of, but you are aware in your communities where you're able to support us, and we can start to build a plan in how we're actually going to respond, and maybe there's things we can do helping protect those communities. Know how to respond. So a plan, emergency evacuation plan, not just for your family, but for the community as well. Know where your place of safety is, where you're able to support and get information as well. That's incredibly important as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the grab bag as well. I have one at home. So if my family is displaced, I have a grab bag with important equipment in that I can use that will be able to help me and my family, feel safer. And then that leads to the road to recovery. Once we're in the road to recovery, we can obviously review and analyze that hazard. How could we have prevented, protected? Was our evacuation plan correct? Did we have the right equipment in our grab and go bag? Next slide, please, Mark. This is all, any incident is about the actual people itself. Emergencies and disasters are about people. The most vulnerable in our society and those caring for them have specific needs in an emergency. So this is all about knowing your neighbours, checking on them, ensuring carers can still visit and that there's contingency, medication availability. And that's mostly about who can you contact if communities are cut off? Who can you contact to say, we are struggling, we're unable to get medication to a particular person because it's been cut off from their usual supply. Are you able to support us? And that's all about planning for those instances. And that's what we're trying to do here, is making sure that we have those plans available. We have those contacts with the community champions. We have those places of safety which are in your communities. And we can start to work on a plan to building that resilience. Mark, next slide, please. So this is all about cross-organisational working and partnerships. So you have the individual households, which is the narrative in the top left corner. In the middle, you have about building social capital through bonding and bridging. So encourage social interaction. And I know a lot goes on within communities, but it's encouraging more. So people get that information that they need in regards to being prepared and ready to act. Communities building social capacity. So communities are safe and more secure, more tolerant and respectful, more transparent. So it's about all that sort of, passing on risks, making sure people understand the areas that they're in and what not to do, and how they can communicate, how a community as a whole can communicate better. Support local businesses and local production. It's important that you then become more resilient in yourself, and obviously business continuity. Again, as I mentioned in the last slide, if you're cut off, what is your plan B? What is your plan C? And that's where we come in to support you as communities. And obviously there are other organisations here, like the police, like the other emergency services, and also there are other organisations like the Environment Agency and the voluntary agencies that come under us. We've just recently, today actually, practiced our rest centre, setting up a rest centre, and we were supported by the British Red Cross and Rapid Relief Team as well, that provide food, welfare, which was absolutely brilliant. And we plan that on a regular basis to make sure we know what to do when people are displaced. And this brings all the jigsaw together. All that support is there to bring the jigsaw together to make sure that we are prepared and building that resilience amongst the communities. Next slide, please, Mark. So this is all the communication tools that we plan to use. So advice and guidance. We're refreshing our community resilience page on our webpage, Bath and North East Somerset webpage, and it will also have very specific community resilience information that we will signpost people to. Warning and informing. So it's making sure that people understand what those hazards are and how we will inform and how we will actually communicate when there's an incident. So who, in your community, who do you know who to get in touch with to say, actually, there's a risk here. I think something's happening. I think we need some advice or we need some response to support. Promotion, where do we promote our information? Again, the website, and we've also got some posters, leaflets that we're going to provide as well. And we can write articles in your publications, in your in your local community newsletters and things like that to inform where places of safety are, key numbers and so on. And also if there are other channels or people networks which we can support, which you will know and we won't, but it's about getting that message out there. And then that communications contact details, really key, as we found with lots of incidences that we've experienced, that any plan is great, absolutely fantastic. But if you can't get hold of the right people because telephone numbers are wrong or you're unable to contact key people, then that delays time, puts lives at risk and becomes a real issue as you try to respond as we go forward. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Lucy, who's going to explain the next steps and what we're going to ask you as the community members to do. Thank you.
So next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So what we're doing at the moment is going out to communities via the community engagement team, and we're going to be asking them for emergency community contacts, and they'd be the people in the community who would be able to develop the community resilience plans, emergency plans that could potentially be linking to existing community or parish plans, or if you've obviously already got an emergency plan, then making sure it's up to date and has all the contact details and all of that. Also acting as a point of contact for the emergency services in an emergency and providing useful information about the community and its resources. And to act as a focal point for the promotion of community resilience within the community. And the final point is to support the community and local authority in preparing for emergencies and providing warnings of impending incidents or issues. So that could be, as simple as notifying us when you've received maybe a flood warning, but you know that drains are blocked. So we can send out our highways team to sort that issue out, which would stop, a flooding event in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've got our community emergency plan templates. So what we plan to do is send these out once we've got those designated contacts. And the template has everything you need to fill out information for the plan. And the main point here is to identify those community contacts. So you can see the box in the middle there, which would be the main person in the community, the coordinator, a deputy, and maybe a couple of others who you'd be able to kind of put together a team if there was an emergency, and they would be the contacts that we would hold as well, so we could call them if we knew that there was an emergency in that community, and vice versa, they could call us. And the community flood plan, which is linked to that, which the Environment Agency has developed, and it's got similar information but focuses specifically on those communities who are at risk of flooding. And I know that Coombe Hay and Paul has sent over their emergency plan, so we're reviewing that at the moment, which is really great, and they're ahead of us, so yeah, that's great. Next slide, please. And these are the resources that are going to be available to communities. So on the left-hand side, we've got the emergency preparedness poster. So we'll be getting those out so communities can put them in their village halls or parish churches. And they're also going to have our website on them when we've got that all sorted. Then we've got the plan template, which will get sent round to contacts. We've got our Twitter, Resilience at Baines. So we'll be able to put out, notices on there, warnings on there, information on there. And for flood planning and advice, you've got the Environment Agency, and they've got loads of information. And then our webpage, which we've already mentioned, which is in development, hopefully will be published soon. And our email address, emergencyplanning@bathnest.gov.uk. So if you want to contact us or you've got a plan you want to send us, that's the email address to go by, and we can put that in the chat as well at the end. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to identify these emergency community contacts. So we'll be linking with the community engagement team to do that. Then it will be to work with those communities to write, develop, draft, update their emergency plans. They can then send those plans to us so we can hold a copy. So we've got those contact details and make sure that they've got ours. And then it's integrating it into the community and making sure, everyone knows what to do, where they're safe places in the community if something were to happen. And the last point, test, exercise and update. So that's kind of, the emergency planning cycle. So once you've updated a plan, you might want to test it in your community. You might want to do a little exercise. And then, anything that comes out of that, you can then update the plan and the cycle goes round. So that's our next steps, and we'll be in contact, and that's it from me. So any questions?
There you go. Any questions? I think there's an awful lot of information there, and certainly the questions that came up for me along the way ended up being answered. I think that may apply to everyone else. So let's hope we can move forwards and get something in place. Brian.
Can you hear me? It's fine. Sorry, I couldn't find the hand which appears to indicate I want to speak. I'm just wondering, this is slightly different or slightly away from what has been discussed. English Coombe Parish Council at the present moment are considering the possibility of using the community infrastructure levy money that we have in providing defibrillators. One for English Coombe, one for Inglesbatch. And I just wondered whether, in fact, I think this has something to do with resilience, but do other parishes have any input, any knowledge of the use of these, and whether they consider them to be worthwhile?
John?
Fiona, yes?
Yeah, I could perhaps answer Brian's question there. I mean, we as a council have installed over the years around 50 locations around Bath and North East Somerset for defibrillators, and we've also installed an awful lot of river cabinets as well. Now, the usefulness of them is only as good as if they are linked into the emergency services. So with all the devices that have been put into being, they all are connected through to the ambulance service and emergency services. So if you have a defibrillator, it's really important that it's checked regularly and it's kept online with Southwest Ambulance, so that if somebody does need to use it, then by ringing 999, they can be told where the nearest location is for a defibrillator. And also, again, if we have a very rampant river that runs through our area, and when that gets high, people do tend to have accidents. Again, those river cabinets are connected in to the emergency services, and they can give a code to open them so that people can access emergency equipment in those cabinets as well. So I would say to Brian, yes, they are a very useful resource, and they are very well used around the area, and they have been proven to save lives as well.
Thank you very much indeed. That was most helpful.
Dave.
Yes, John, being ex-military, I've got some experience of contingency planning and incident management and the rest of it. I haven't got a question. I'd just like to ask that we manage expectations around this subject. I've no problem at all with what's being requested, but my honest expectation is that when we try and find people in our local community to do all this work, and it is a stupendous amount of work, we are going to get a very, very, very low rate of response. So the speed at which we're going to be able to take this forward, in my humble view, is going to be slow. For all the wondrous things that the ideas pin up, I've got no problem with that. I just don't see us being able to make much progress very quickly, as much as we would wish otherwise.
Thank you, Dave. Fiona.
Yeah, a couple of things to Brian's point. One, we have got a defibrillator in South Stoke, and it was nearly used in need. Somebody had a problem with their heart, and it's also to a certain extent diagnostic, in that it said that the person shouldn't be defibrillated. But on the other hand, we do have it, and it was useful on that occasion. And in fact, we had a member of our village who's a nurse who knew what she was doing. So I think it was definitely worth it. The other thing we have in South Stoke, which we set up in COVID, is a WhatsApp. And somebody else collapsed in the village on one of the footpaths, and within a couple of minutes, as a result of having the WhatsApp, we were able to call the ambulance, and we were able to call assistance from people within the village. So both have been extremely helpful. So I would recommend that if other villages don't have them, they set up WhatsApp immediately, and also get defibrillators.
So basically,
item
5 on the agenda, how can we work together to address the cost of living crisis, is something the council's been looking at for the last 6 weeks or so, on the basis that potentially there could be quite an issue over the next 6 months. We know some of this because some of the signs that we're getting, some of the conversations that we're having with the community and voluntary sector. So for instance, with the food banks and the food pantries, we know that we have not a significant number, but quite a number of council staff that are using food banks and food pantries for the very first time. We know that the CAB have noticed a 30% increase in the last month or so in the number of cases coming forward as a part to what they normally would have done. And obviously we're dependent, and we're dependent on how severe the winter is going to be. But we do think that there are going to be some significant issues and spike points between now and Easter that we're trying to prepare for to start with. And what we're doing is, I've been working at the Community Wellbeing Hub for 2.5 years, since March 2020. That Community Wellbeing Hub was set up to deal with COVID. And over the 2.5 years, it's dealt with COVID, it's dealt with the vaccination centres, it's dealt with homes from help for people coming out of hospital and the IUH. It's dealt with things like Homes for Ukraine. So we know that we've got a model and a system that works, that engages with local community and voluntary organisations. And we know that we need the support of as many organisations as possible to help us deliver some of those outputs. So we knew from COVID that an awful lot of parish and town councils did remarkable work that actually saved us because we were swamped. There was no way that we were going to be able to deliver an awful lot of what happened without the support of individual parish and town councils. So what we're doing now at the moment is we're trying to make preparations to do something if the cost of living crisis is as bad as some people think, and hopefully it won't be, but it just prepares to be planned, not planned to be prepared over the next 6 months. So basically what we're doing is we've got our community wellbeing hub, which is based at Peasdown, which is the council, HCRG, which is our adult social care providers, and the community and voluntary sector, and a lot of the community organisations, so CAB, Bath Mind around mental health, and a whole host of other organisations. But what we need is basically we need some communications with the parish and town councils about what provision potentially could be available if we need it in your particular areas. So for instance, give a good example, I mean, down in the Chew Valley parishes during COVID, we had some input as a council down there, but very, very little prepared for the population size, partly because it was self-organised and partly because we had good relationships with the councils and they were able to deliver some of those services at a grassroots level. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment. So from a council perspective, we're looking at our libraries, we're looking at our community buildings and our community facilities. We're looking at opportunities potentially during the winter to have them open as warm welcome spots places so that we can actually direct people to go there during the daytime so that they can, so they are having to turn their heating off, they can be warm. But we're looking at also the ideas about potential around with the food banks and food pantries, not only about delivering food to people, but also about actually hot food, because some of the crisis issues at the moment with the charity sector is that people can afford food, but they can't afford to actually cook it. So if you go to a food bank, you will find that they've got lots of food, lots of potatoes and root vegetables that they can't give away because people can't actually afford to turn the ovens on to actually cook them. So it's all those things we're trying to bring together. And this is just basically an appeal to you all as parishes to get in touch with me and to get in touch with Mark and John and just give us any information or anything that you're talking about as individual parishes, whereby if we get a really, really cold snap and we get a load of snow, you know, is there something that can happen in your particular village or area or collectively that we can build some of that information, pass that on to people. And so the other thing that we're also doing as a community wellbeing hub, just very quickly, we've got what we call a software system called Rivium, which allows us to share confidential, sensitive information about people with their permission to basically, if we get complex cases where they need the intervention from more than one agency, we can share that information around those agencies. What we're looking to develop very shortly is a online referral form. So if you as a parish or organizations or some of the community organizations that you're involved with come across people who need additional support over and above what you feel you can give them, there will be an opportunity for you as a trusted organization to put an online referral form into the hub and allow us to try and unpick some of those complex needs of some of those individuals and try and be proactive and support them. So that will be something that we'll be in touch with you about later on. But basically that's the pitch, if you like. We're looking for your support again, and we're looking for anything that you can do as parishes, councils, or community halls or facilities about, you know, what happens, what if we have a week's worth of snow in January, what are we going to do? That's it, John, actually, from me.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Questions?
Any questions then, anyone? Dave, short, sharp and succinct. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just one point from me. I guess the point you made at the end, Dave, was you know, what do we do if we get a week's worth of snow in January or something? That all feeds into the emergency plan as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, the whole things are interconnected and interlinked.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so actually, it's just to try and just to raise that profile. It may not happen, but after 2.5 years of working in the hub with all our agencies and organizations, we built up an awful lot of experience and shared knowledge about the what ifs, and we're just conscious that we don't want to get caught out on the hop again and try and make preparations now. So again, yeah, we can use our libraries, but we don't have a library in every single parish. So we've got to look again at pushing and get support from the grassroots level to deliver some of those more acute needs that are going to happen in individual villages. That's it.
Thank you. I suppose I've got one quick question. As a large support network put in place for COVID, especially for supporting the vulnerable, is similar going to be put in place?
Potentially, yes. Potentially, yes. So, for instance, for 2.5 years, we did food packages and support for COVID patients and clinically extremely vulnerable people. Just the day before yesterday, we had a young lady with 3 children who caught COVID, who was very poorly with it, couldn't leave the house, so couldn't buy food to feed her children. So, you know, 2.5 years after this has started, it's still going on. It's those kind of acute things. What we're conscious about is we can deal with the really difficult, complicated, acute issues. But if there's a general demand, we just don't have the staffing resources unless we can do it, and we can support you to help you to help us to help you to help us.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And any other questions? If not, thank you, Dave. We'll move on. Transport. Pam, thank you very much for joining us. You're very, very welcome. Shall I just say the floor is yours? You're on mute, I'm afraid. Don't worry, Pam, that's been my trick all evening.
Right, does that work?
That works.
Brilliant. Sorry, I'm joining from my phone. My computer has decided not to connect to the internet, I'm afraid, so I can't join from my work computer. But a huge thank you for having me to your forum. It's really fantastic to be here. So for tonight's session, I was hoping just to give a very brief overview as to where we are in terms of our ambitions for transport, and then really hand over to yourselves to hear from you as to what it is you would like to see Bath and North East Somerset Council doing, and how we can work together to achieve those aims. So, as you'll be aware, we as a council adopted our Journey to Net Zero plan in 2022, May 2022, which essentially sets out the ways in which we would like to look towards achieving net zero by 2030 in accordance with the climate and ecological emergencies which were declared by the council. And we've got a lot of plans and a lot of ideas about how we can go on and deliver improvements in transport. The West of England Combined Authority, which is the overarching local transport authority for our region, was very successful in gaining £540 million worth of infrastructure investment from the government. And that has come through to Baines in a variety of different programmes of investment through what's being known as the CRSTS, the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. What that means essentially is that Bath and North East Somerset have been allocated just under £140 million worth of funding to be spent on a number of strategic corridors programmes of investment. And included within that are things like the A4 Bristol to Bath corridor, the A36, A367 corridors and links, Bath City Centre, and a number of other programmes, including livable neighbourhoods. And all of these programmes are designed to set up the sustainable transport infrastructure, so infrastructure for walking, cycling and public transport that we need as a district to enable our residents and our communities to have a choice about how they travel. and it hopefully leads to an increased amount of uptake for walking, cycling, public transport. So that was really all I wanted to say by means of an introduction to transport within Bath and North East Somerset. And as I say, very, very keen to hear from you and your residents as to what sort of things you would like to see for your communities, which would best meet your needs.
I think it's rather selfish, but I think the best thing that you could do from a transport point of view for sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, it's my fault. I was talking, I was muted. What an idiot.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it's a bit selfish, but certainly from our down in Coombe, probably South Stoke as well, the best thing you could do for transport and for net zero is to not authorise the building of another 400 houses on the plateau, because that's just going to create so much traffic. And given the geography of the place, cycling from, is not really that viable given the hills and state of the roads around our area. So from our point of view, I think that would be the best thing you could do for us.
And so
sorry, carry on. Carry on, Pam.
Is that essentially that you feel that there isn't the infrastructure to enable people to cycle, or is it simply the kind of topography and the fact that using a kind of conventional push bike just isn't a viable option?
It's not really a viable option from down in Coombe up to up into town particularly.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the sheer weight of traffic that's going to be created through the building of those houses. And even I think one of the feelings is that although the building cycle paths between those houses and the park and ride, so people can cycle or walk to the park and ride and then get a bus down into town, as soon as it starts raining, people are not going to do that unless there's covered walkways. I mean, I lived in Singapore for a while, and one of the ways that they got people to use to walk and to cycle more, and it was phenomenally successful, was covered walkways. As soon as it started raining, people used taxis and cars. So what they did was cover all of the pavements, and then people used them. Obviously, it's a bit different in the UK because it's colder, but I'm not sure that we were going to be having covered pavements and covered cycleways to work. But anyway, it worked there. But if we're not doing that, then sheer weight of traffic being created by all those houses will be a problem.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Pam, I'm not sure if you're aware. I know there's some questions. Just bear with me a sec, if you would, please. Pam, I'm not sure if you're aware, but an issues list was built within the forum some months ago. Have you been made aware of that list? Excellent.
Yes.
That means I won't have to, and we won't have to go over that because you're already aware.
No, I've got that. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Dave.
Is that me, John?
Yes, sorry.
Hello, Pam. Good to see you again.
Hi, Dave.
I'm very encouraged that the Journey to Net Zero Transport Forum has stood up and that we have a clear and visible way to get these issues discussed. 2 points I'll raise tonight, one fairly short term, one fairly long term. Short term, you referred to the two studies, the A367 and the 37 corridor studies. We were told about them a while ago. We were involved in an early survey that WECA set out. We've heard nothing since. And it would be nice to know where those studies are and what any emerging findings might be so that we can pass them on to our residents. It's all gone very quiet. Maybe that's a good thing, but we don't know. We have an interest because although we sort of straddle the 367, most of our area is the rural area either side of the 367, which we are told that WECA will look at once they've got the 367 sorted out. So our residents are very interested in finding out what's happening to the 367 study so that they better understand when they're going to be considered. So if you could tease out more information
Yeah,
from
certainly.
those studies, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We can
And
do that.
the longer and more difficult point I'll throw on the table, all the conversations to date have perhaps been about what residents need to travel on buses or to get from A to B. And that's entirely understandable. It's where the conversations come from. I'm just wondering whether this is the point now where we try with WECA to look at the other end of the telescope and say that if collectively we want to get to net zero by 2030, what does a public transport system look like that's going to encourage people to get on it to achieve those ends? I.e., rather than worry about how many people are standing at the bus stop wanting to get from A to B, look at it the other way. If you want net zero, how many people are you going to have to convince to get to the bus stop? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yes.
I don't sense that conversation's going on at all. But WECA is worried about infrastructures and money and all the good stuff, but it's all sort of demand side driven. How many people want to stand at bus stop A and bus stop B, and where could we put bus stop C? But this is all bottom up stuff. What's the top down vision that's going to drive your strategy for Baines? What does a public transport system look like that's going to get people to use it? That's difficult. But I think unless we start looking at it from that end of the question, we are going to struggle.
Yeah, no, that's a really helpful point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I've had one thing to the point you've raised, Dave, is one of the comments I've received in my several times in my community is the buses, our public transport doesn't satisfy all our travel needs. Some key journeys that cannot be undertaken by public transport. If you look at the infrastructure that we have, and think about what we need to do to the existing services, we're not actually satisfying the full needs. What are the full needs that we need satisfied to get people out of the cars? And also to allow the elderly to get there without, not solely elderly, but those who need transport not to have to recourse to other people's cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the need?
And I think that's a really interesting question, because I think traditionally we've kind of looked at who is traveling and how we can improve their journeys, as opposed to who isn't traveling and how can we accommodate and change the transport network to make sure that people who perhaps aren't able to travel currently can then begin to travel. Yeah. And I think that that's a real shift that is happening within the industry now, which is really positive, I think. But it's getting all of those elements lined up and understanding how we can really tap into that demand that previously we haven't been able to understand to the degree that we should have been able to.
Absolutely. If I go along the row in turn, and I come to you all, on the left I've got Fiona Gurley. Sorry.
Gurley.
I'm really not doing well tonight.
That's fine. Okay, so just to say, of course, I agree with Paul about the impact on South Stoke and Coombe Hay if the houses are built, but it's not just us. I mean, the impact on the B3110, the roads from south, from Radstock and so on. If there's additional cars, it's going to impact everyone. So there's that. The fact that the estate is being designed so there's not room for buses around the estate. And I've seen that elsewhere where that's happened, where people are forced to use their cars because there isn't room for a bus to go through. I think that's something else that's really important. And there are other villages that have lost their buses, like Monkton, for example, and they are forced to have to go by car because realistically, anyone with legs of steel could cycle up the hill from Monkton. So I think there are issues with trying to get people onto bikes, although people would want to. So I think that's probably enough from me, although I would love to see a cycle route all the way along the ridge from the park and ride down all the way through to the university. so that people can get out of their cars and along that ridge, because that's at least cyclable, even if it's hard to get up from the villages.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just ask you, Fiona, on the point you just raised, Moncton, do you mean Moncton Combe?
Yeah.
Because they have the 94 bus is still running.
They've lost the bus within the village, from what I understand, of a friend of mine.
Ah, okay. Because in Freshwood we work very closely with Moncton Combe, so hence my surprise. Okay, thank you.
John, you're on mute, but I'm lip reading and hoping you're asking.
Maura, I really am failing abysmally. I'm giving a masterclass in how not to chair a meeting. I do apologise.
Okay, my lip reading is good. I mean, you're talking kind of long term. We're talking as a village that as of this Friday is going to lose its bus connections in every way that affects the people who are probably less able in the village. People who've chosen to live somewhere with a bus, who have no cars, who just can't actually see how they can continue. I think Sarah touched on demand-led transport, and I'd be really interested to know where that is going and how we can perhaps make it known to the people who are just feeling very let down.
Thank you. So I think Sarah wants to have a word.
Yeah, thank you, Maura. So demand responsive transport is in our area, unfortunately, is I think not a quick thing. It won't start in the coming weeks, but we are very forcefully making the point to WECA that we definitely want it to come to those areas that are losing bus services, and as soon as possible. And there might be opportunities, I think, through the bus service improvement plan for some of that to come forward. But just to say, in terms of, I was about to post on Facebook this evening, actually, for those Bathavon residents who can't access the D1 on the A36, there is the opportunity to use the Bath dial-a-ride if they can't use it because, you know, because of infirmity or vulnerability for whatever reason. So I think that's being somewhat extended in terms of its capacity and possibly its geographical area, and they will be able to access that. So I'll post that information. Could I? Maybe I'll come back later. I don't know, John. I wanted to respond to a couple of the other points that people had made. Shall I do that now or later?
I'm feeling a bit bad for Fiona, if I'm honest. If we could have Fiona and then come back to you, would that be okay, Sarah? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Fiona, yes.
Yes, very quickly, I'll keep it short and sharp, moving on from the other points about cycling and working towards net zero. We here in Bristol, we are out in the country. We do have a lot of people who would like to cycle into Bath, but quite frankly, they're too scared to, because they take their lives in, their lives in their hands every time they go around those busy main roads, roundabouts, etc., etc. Cycling is not going to happen in this city until there are safe, continuous cycle routes down into the city centre, around as the other, around the city, as the other Fiona suggested. It just won't happen because it's not safe. So from just a short bit from me, that's what we'd like to see, please. That's my bit.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Sarah.
Yeah, so to pick up on Dave's point about WECA tending to focus on detail and those people who are already using the service, that is exactly what we've found, and we have been trying to encourage them to step back and look a bit more at the big picture. So far, we've not had a great deal of success. So if some of you want to write to Dan Norris and suggest it to him, do carry on, and we're all trying to work with, in the same direction. In terms of new development, and I mean it's very difficult, isn't it? Because we've obviously got quotas for housing that we have to produce. So one thing you could do in terms of responding to the local plan is you could say that you you know, for example, you could say that you want us to seek to enforce car-free development, certainly within certain mileages of the city centre. That's something we could, you know, we could perhaps enforce. And then in terms of the point about cycling, absolutely, that's very much in our vision. I suppose, you know, compared to somewhere like Cambridge or Oxford that's been doing this for years and years, decades and decades, we're beginners at this, so it will take us time, unfortunately, to get cycle lanes out to everywhere. But that is what our aspiration is, and you know, in the coming months, it would be good to get to a place where we have a sort of, you know, a map that explains our aspiration to everyone, the extent of it, so that they understand when one short cycle lane's going in, it's not the road to nowhere. What it is one piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and the plan is to extend that and to build, you know, fill in the rest of the jigsaw in time.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I suppose there are 2 points I want Dave. Before I put forth, you may be covering the same point. Go for it.
It's just a point of clarification regarding demand responsive transport. As I understand it, and maybe I don't, demand responsive transport exists at the moment. It's called dial-a-ride. That's demand responsive transport in all its forms. It's being trialled in other more sexy forms elsewhere in the country, driven by technology largely, in response to very enthusiastic consultants who would tell you it works. As far as I'm aware, and again I might be wrong, nobody's made it work in this new sexy form. So I don't think we should be waiting for these new forms of sexy forms of demand responsive transport, however attractive they might be. We do have demand responsive transport called dial-a-ride. Perhaps if we rebadged all the dial-a-ride schemes in a new way, they would become more obviously the short-term solution to demand responsive transport. I rest my case, my lord.
You mean a sexier presentation of the service?
Well, certainly in our experience here, and maybe it's backwards impression, dial-a-ride is often seen by people as a means to get old people to the doctors. That's what it's for, isn't it? Well, if we can look at things a different way and start to market these very valuable services as a key part of the transport solution in the future for Baines, as a demand responsive solution, we might be able to make some progress. I don't think we will any other way.
Interesting point, perception. 2 points I was going to raise. One, which has come out of discussions, and I think you're fully aware of this, Dave. I'm not sure who else is, but there is a degree of funding available from WECA for parish councils to provide some kind of service, but that's up to us to define.
Is that one of Dan Norris's aspirations, John? I'm not sure it's actually available yet.
I thought he said it was available.
I don't think it is yet.
That could be my bad.
I think it's where he wants to go, and all power to him for that, but I don't think it's available yet.
Okay. However, looking forward to next steps, I mean, this is what you and I discussed, Dave. What do we need to do as a forum to build a picture on transport needs, which was a thread in the climate emergency response we worked on?
Yeah. But I think now the Journey to Net Zero Transport Forum has been set up. It is a means for this forum and any of its members to get involved in this conversation in a new and meaningful way. I think the question needs to be asked, what value would be added by this forum creating a view on transport needs across its area? bearing in mind it's a very wide and diverse demographic. So my view, it might be worth throwing something out saying, what do you think the transport issues are in your area within the forum? That might give us a collective clue as to whether it's worth the candle to distill the many views into something that, well, what would go into the joint Journey to Net Zero Transport Forum? I don't know. I remain to be convinced now that the forum has stood up, that this forum could add anything of great value from its own viewpoint, but I might be wrong.
Okay, no, I accept that. Before I come to you, Pam, Peter Bryant. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
I just wanted to know to what extent the funds were available to get rid of issues with placing of electric charging stations for cars. I take it that people will be allowed to use cars to some extent in the future. So that was just a question for Pam, I believe.
Pam, I'll hand over to you to quite meanly pass the ball, and please keep going with your point.
Thanks. Apologies, I missed the first part of that. I think it was about electric charging.
Yes.
For vehicles. Yeah. So we're working. We've just recently recruited a fantastic new officer who's come with a huge amount of experience and knowledge around EV charging points, and we are redrafting our approach to how to enable our communities to have access to EV charging points, to enable people to have that confidence in being able to charge regardless of what housing type they are living in, to make sure that that is available for all our residents. So that is underway, and a revised strategy will be coming out shortly on that. What I wanted to say to Dave's point was it would be enormously helpful for us to have a synthesis of your views and aspirations for transport from your area. As Lee will have explained, the revised approach that the Director of Sustainable Communities is advocating at the moment is trying to pull together the different threads around the different themes that people interact with the council on. And I think being able to talk about the needs of your area is incredibly helpful for us, because that enables us to really push those ideas and demands to the forefront. So from our perspective, it would be enormously helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful guidance. Interesting. Peter, do you have another point, or is your hand still up?
No, I just wanted to, yes, I put it up again. I just wanted to ask a question, given that there is now facility for the planning of community electronic vehicle charging stations. Are we addressing issues of planning and way leave concerning the construction and the running of cables that is necessary to put the infrastructure actually in place?
I'm afraid that's more technical than I can answer, but I can certainly get Alex to get in touch with you and he can talk you through that.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So from the sounds of it, from the general discussion, David, it would seem our next steps are to synthesize the views of all the parish councils. So we need go out and pull in the views of each parish council, or we can call a meeting for that discussion, but I'm a bit skeptical as to whether that would pull it all together. Does that seem like a reasonable next step?
It's a reasonable next step, John, but there's just the risk that when we go out to the members of the forum and saying, what are the transport issues in your area, experience of the last 3 or 4 years in the Baines Rural Transport Group suggests we'll get responses back like, well, we need more public transport.
That
Yeah.
comes down to how the questions are presented.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should have a get together. I don't know if Baines could give us some support on this, on the wording, because this is what we need very careful presentation of the engagement.
What I'm interested in, John, to avoid nugatory work here, is what information could be provided through this forum that cannot be already provided to the existing Journey to Net Zero Transport Forum. If we can clarify that and then go out with a request to the parishes saying there's an information gap here, can you fill it? That sounds much more sensible. If we just give them a blank sheet saying, what do you think about transport, then the floodgates open.
Yeah. Pam, is that something you could help with?
Yeah, certainly. I'd be absolutely delighted to. I think the key point is around the kind of community connections. I think that generally the focus is on kind of the radial corridors, if you like, and looking at the strategic corridors. And the Journey to Net Zero Forum, while it's a hugely beneficial focal point for discussion with the stakeholders, I think what it wouldn't be, what it wouldn't cover in as much detail as we would like it to is the specific local information about your particular communities and what you feel would be useful for your particular communities, like, for example, a car club in X location, or, you know, that kind of thing. And that kind of level of granularity is probably not something we would get into in the Journey to Net Zero Forum. But yeah, more than happy to work with you on that if that would be helpful.
I'm just thinking through, because I think Dave raises a very good point. How could we actually reach the view of understanding what we need ask? That's what I'm hearing. Have I misunderstood?
See, the Journey to Net Zero Forum recently launched its bus service review. Very welcome, very valuable, and illuminating in its way. So what else is required in addition to the information we've gleaned from that review? Do you follow me? Because we've done a review through the Joint Transport Forum saying, what do you think of the bus services then? And now we're saying, well, we need more information supplied through the forum. I'm not sure I can get my hand around that cloud, because every time I try to grab it, it disappears in my grasp. It's difficult to understand what we need to ask the parishes and communities that hasn't already been asked, and won't result in the answer, well, we want more of it.
I suppose what we would be interested to understand, because the bus services consultation that was run through the forum was incredibly helpful, but it was done with a very specific purpose, looking specifically at more conventional bus services and what we can do about improving that network. I suppose what I would be interested in understanding from your communities is access to the bus network, perhaps, or access to the train services. But I suppose looking at the breadth of options around transport that would be helpful. So whether it would be, as I said, a kind of car club type thing, whether it's improved maintenance of footways, you know, all of that kind of stuff would be helpful from my perspective.
The problem is if we go to
Dave, can I make a suggestion? Because I can see there's a bit of, I don't think I'm going to draw a conclusion to this within the next few minutes, if I'm honest, because questions will come up. Could I suggest a following meeting where we go through this exact point?
More than happy.
Thank you. Louise, would you like to join us?
I'd be very happy, and I think that'll be beneficial for many areas of council work to have that. start it on transport. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a key action mark for us to set that meeting up, and we can get some clarity over this. I don't think a 2-minute discussion is going to answer it.
No, I agree, John, and yeah, I'm more than happy to be involved in that as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, I think all hands are down, and we're losing people on the meeting. Thank you very much, Pam. That was really helpful, and I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you shortly.
Thanks very much, everyone. Cheerio.
Thank you. Mark has just reminded me the final part of the evening is the AGM, at which point I'm really tempted just to close the meeting down.
Don't worry, John, I'll keep this very quick. I get 5 minutes every year to be in charge of a forum, and this is it.
This is it.
And it won't take any more than 5 minutes, I promise you, because I'm conscious of time. It's 8 o'clock. Yes, item 7 on the agenda, which is the AGM. The annual report and the terms of reference for your particular forum have been circulated by Mark with the agenda, and as far as we are aware, that we haven't had any amendments or any requests for changes have been received, and so you're obviously very happy with it. If it subsequently transpires that you're not very happy with it, then next year you get a chance to amend it and change it again, because it comes around every year with the AGM. So the only person that's nominated themselves at the moment for chair of your particular forum is John. There have been no other nominations, unless there are any nominations now this evening.
I'll nominate Dave because it's good there's competition.
In which case, John, I'm delighted to say that you have been returned again and opposed as chair of the Bathavon Forum for the next 12 months until the next AGM.
Thank you, I think.
Congratulations. So I can hand the chair back to yourself. That's it. That's my...
Everybody, thank you very much for coming. Here endeth the Bathavon Forum Cam Valley Forum meeting.